The Buddha once said, "A man struck by a poisoned arrow does not ask who shot it or why. He pulls it out. Do the same with your suffering." Is there something weighing on you right now? Maybe work isn't going the way you hoped. Maybe a relationship is draining you. Maybe the future feels so uncertain that you lie awake at night, unable to sleep. When days like that pile up, what do? Most of us think, we replay it all. Why did this happen? Who's to blame? What if I'd made a different choice back then? We turn it over and over in our minds, searching for an answer. But have you ever noticed something? The more you think, the heavier it gets. You set out looking for answers, and somehow you end up sinking deeper. I think most of us know that feeling. Today I'd like to share a short story the Buddha told 2,500 years ago. Just one simple parable, but it quietly and unmistakably carries something we really need to hear, right now. Pull out the arrow first. Let's sit with those words together. There was once a man struck by a poisoned arrow. His friends gathered around him wanting to help, but before anyone could remove it, he stopped them. "Wait," he said. "First I need to know who shot this arrow. What was their name? Where did they come from? What were they thinking when they drew their bow?" By the time he finished asking questions, the poison had already spread through his whole body, and it was too late. The arrow had done its work, not because it was shot, but because he spent his final moments investigating it instead of removing it. This is what happens when we endlessly analyze our pain, rather than simply set it down. This story takes us back about 2,500 years. In a town in ancient India, there lived a young monk, a sharp, restless young man who couldn't help but push every question to its absolute limit. One night, he couldn't sleep. His mind was seized by a set of questions he simply couldn't let go of. Does this world go on forever, or does it have an end? Is the universe infinite or bounded? Where does the soul go after death? Is the mind the same as the body, or something separate? These are questions every human being has wrestled with at some point. Deep, elemental questions. And this young monk was growing frustrated that the Buddha had never given him a clear answer. The next morning, he went to the Buddha with a determined look on his face and said, "Teacher, if you will not answer my questions, I am leaving. Answer me now. Is the world eternal? Is there life after death? Are the mind and body the same?" The other monks held their breath. The Buddha looked at him calmly and said, "I never asked you to follow me, and I never promised to answer those questions. You've set conditions of your own making." Then, in a quiet and unhurried voice, the Buddha began to tell a story. Suppose a man is struck by a poisoned arrow. His companions rush to pull it out, but the man says, "Wait, I need to know who shot this arrow first. Was he tall or short, a warrior or a priest? What was the bow made of? What shape was the arrowhead?" He refuses to let anyone touch it until he has his answers. The Buddha paused for a moment, then asked, "What do you think happens to that man?" The young monk went quiet and looked down. The answer was obvious. The poison spreads. He dies. The Buddha said gently, "Right now, you have an arrow in you. Pulling it out comes first. You don't need to know whether the world is eternal in order to free yourself from suffering. But if you wait for all your answers before you begin, your life will end just as it is." Later accounts say the young monk sat in long silence and felt something quietly come loose, deep in his chest. This story, known as the parable of the poisoned arrow, is one of the most beloved teachings in all of Buddhism. So what was the Buddha actually trying to say? In one sentence, start by acknowledging your pain exactly as it is, right now. We do this so often. When something painful happens, instead of turning toward the pain itself, we rush to explain it. We search for someone to blame, or we tell ourselves, this shouldn't be happening, and find ways to postpone facing reality. The questions the young monk kept asking, is the world eternal? Where does the soul go? Weren't bad questions. They're deeply human questions. But here's what the Buddha was saying. Waiting for those answers won't ease your pain right now. First, see the arrow. Look at the wound exactly as it is. Buddhism holds something called receptive seeing, sometimes called yathabhutam in the ancient language, at its very heart. The word sounds formal, but the meaning is beautifully simple. See things as they actually are. Not make the worst of it. Not pretend it's fine. Just see it clearly. When you're sad, instead of telling yourself, "I shouldn't feel this way," you simply notice, Oh, I'm sad right now. When anger rises, instead of pushing it down, you acknowledge, this anger is real. And something shifts when you do that. Something begins to move. The Buddha wasn't saying, don't think. He was saying, get the order right. First, accept what's here. Then ask your questions. The questions will still be there after the arrow comes out, but as long as you're busy debating who shot it, the wound stays open. 2,500 years ago, the Buddha sat with a young monk in pain and said something quietly radical. Healing doesn't begin with understanding. So how do we bring this into the life we're actually living? Let's say you made a mistake at work. The mind immediately starts running. Why am I like this? If I just made a different call, if my manager had been clearer, if the whole system weren't so broken. One why leads to another what if leads to another. Sometimes that kind of thinking is useful. It helps us improve. But before we go there, can we pause and simply acknowledge where we actually are? I made a mistake. I feel embarrassed. I feel scared. Just that. Just naming it honestly. And something quiet happens when you do. The noise settles a little. Or think about a wound from a relationship. Someone said something cruel, betrayed your trust, made you feel invisible. We start picking apart their motives. Why did they do that? Were they always like this? Did I do something to bring this on? But in the language of the arrow, you've been hurt. There's an arrow in your chest. Before you trace it back to the bow, can you just let yourself feel it? If you need to cry, cry. If it feels like betrayal, let it feel like betrayal. Giving yourself permission to feel what's real, that's the first step toward pulling the arrow out. Parenting works the same way. When a child won't listen and you can feel yourself fraying, the mind starts spinning. Why is my kid like this? What am I doing wrong? What should I try next? But if you can stop for just a moment and recognize, I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed right now, something softens, the shoulders drop a little, and for those of us watching ourselves age, feeling the body grow slower, less reliable, the instinct is to resist it. I wasn't like this before. Why is this happening to me? That resistance is completely human. But when you allow yourself to be exactly where you are, in this body, at this age, right now, something becomes possible that wasn't before. You can see what you actually can do from here. Accepting things as they are is not the same as giving up. It's not looking away, it's the opposite. It's really looking, facing it with clear eyes. As the Buddha said, acknowledge the arrow first, see the wound as it is, only then can you begin to pull it out. If something is hard for you today, try this, just for a moment. This is where I am right now, that's all. That's enough to begin. There's really just one thing I wanted to leave with you today. Acknowledge the arrow. What arrow is in you right now? Maybe it's the weight of exhaustion from work. Maybe it's the ache of a broken connection. Maybe it's a fear about the future you can't quite name. Maybe it's a quiet disappointment in yourself. Before you figure out what it's made of, before you trace it back to whoever shot it, just once let yourself say, there is an arrow here. You don't have to deny it. You don't have to act like it isn't there. You don't have to tell yourself you should be doing better. Receiving this moment exactly as it is, that is where everything begins. It is not weakness. It is what the Buddha pointed to as the truest kind of human strength. The fact that you're here, listening to this, that already is a step. You're already moving. Please, tonight, be just a little gentle with yourself. You are doing more than you know. Thank you so much for being here with me today. A woman I know spent years running from the arrow of her father's criticism, only to discover one morning that she was still running, alone in her kitchen, preparing a meal no one would judge. When she finally stopped and turned around to face it, the arrow was still there, yes, but so was she, still breathing, still whole. And in that acknowledgement, something shifted. This is the invitation before you now, not to pull the arrow out alone, but simply to turn and look at it together, with whatever compassion you can muster. The strength you're looking for is already in that turning.